Chapter 1, Introduction to the Human Body. Splitting up my summary notes. The human body consists of 6 structural organizations. Number 1, chemical. Number 2, cellular. Number 3, tissue. Number 4, organ. Number 5, system. And number 6, organism. Organisms. Number 6, organisms. Is the structural and functional living unit of an organism and the smallest living unit in the human body. So one cell is the smallest
living unit of an organism in the human body. Tissues are a group of cells and the materials surrounding them that work together to perform a particular function. Organs are composed of 2 or more different types of tissues that have specific functions and usually have recognizable shapes. Systems consist of related organs that have a common function. An organism is the
Levels of organization. When building a city, you start with bricks. Many bricks joined together makes a wall. Walls working together make a building, and many buildings complete the city. The human body is put together in a similar way. Humans start with cells. Many cells joined together make tissue. Tissue working together make an organ. And many organs make an organ system. Cells are the smallest living part of an organism. Some examples of cells in the human body are brain cells, lung cells, and bone cells.
When cells of similar structure and function join together, they form tissue. A group of brain cells is called brain tissue. A group of lung cells is called lung tissue. And bone cells joined together is called bone tissue. When a group of tissues that perform a specific function join together, they form organs. Brain tissue comes together to make your brain. Your brain is an organ. Lung tissue comes together to make your lungs. And bone tissue comes together to make individual bones. An organ system is a collection of organs working together to perform jobs. Your brain is a part of the nervous system. Your brain, spinal cord, and nerves work together to collect and process information. Your lungs are a part of the respiratory system. Along with the diaphragm and others, they help you breathe. All of the bones in your body are a part of the skeletal system. Bones, cartilage, ligaments, and tendons give your body structure and support. So from smallest to largest, your body is made up of cells, tissue, organs, and then organ systems. These are the levels of organization.
There are 11 systems of the human organism. Number 1, the integumentary system, the skeleton system, the muscular system, the nervous system, the endocrine system, the cardiovascular, lymphatic, respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive systems. All organisms carry on certain processes that distinguish them from a non-living thing. The most important life processes of the human body are metabolism, responsiveness, movement, growth, differentiation, and reproduction. Homeostasis, balance at the equilibrium, is a condition of equilibrium in the body's internal environment produced by the interplay of the human body's regulatory processes. Body fluids are dilute watery solution, intercellular fluid, ICF is inside cell, and extracellular fluid, ECF, is outside cell. Interstitial fluid is the ECF that fills spaces between tissue cells, plasma, and the ECF within blood cells. So the ECF is the extracellular fluid, which is outside the cell. Because it surrounds all body cells, interstitial fluid is called the body's internal environment. So it could be like the heat generated and the thermal environment of your first layer, like below the skin, in your blood vessels. That could be where the fluid is they're referring to. Disturbance of the homeostasis comes from external and internal stimuli and psychological stressors. When disruption of homeostasis is mild and temporary, responses of the body cells quickly restore balance in the internal environment. If disruption is extreme, regulation of homeostasis may fail. So they're basically saying that in a homeostasis stage, which is a perfectly balanced equilibrium where your body is functioning at its optimal and normal capacity, strikes that balance, it's going to disturb your obvious. And the regulation of the balance of that environment might change. So for example, if I get a rash, my skin will be abnormal. I will break the barrier of risk for opening it to different infections or viruses to enter from the skin layer because I got a rash. And rash has open pins that can easily get affected with different contamination of different things. So what I'm trying to say is that the skin, from a dermatology perspective, is supposed to be glowy and clean, right? With nothing on it, ideally. So when the rash comes, then that means my homeostasis of the skin layer, skin feedback loop is not working at its optimal, so the balance is lost. Most often the nervous and endocrine systems acting together or separately regulate homeostasis. The nervous system detects body changes and sends nerve impulses to counteract changes in control conditions. The endocrine system regulates homeostasis by secreting hormones. Now we're going to talk about the feedback system, which includes three components. Receptors monitor changes in control condition and send input to control center. Number 2, the control center sets the value at which a control condition should be maintained. Evaluate the input it receives from receptors. And number 3 component is effectors. Receive output from the control centers and produce a response effect that alters the control condition. Response reserves the original stimulus. The system is operating at the negative feedback. If a response enhances the original stimulus, the system is operating by positive feedback. For example, blood pressure. When we take blood pressure and the control condition for the stimulus to cause the blood pressure to rise, the baroreceptors, pressure-sensitive nerve cells, the receptors in the blood vessels sends impulses input to the brain control center. Component 2, the brain sends impulses output to the heart effectors. As a result, the heart rate decreases, response and blood pressure decreases to normal, restoration of homeostasis. That's an example of a negative feedback. So number 1, why is it a negative feedback?
Arterial blood pressure determines how much blood flows into the capillaries, where the exchange of nutrients and wastes between blood and body cells occurs. If the pressure is too low, not enough blood goes into the capillaries. If the pressure is too high, blood vessels can break, causing internal bleeding and possibly strokes. The aortic arch and common carotids are arteries that supply blood to critical areas of the body. The aortic arch supplies the body, and the common carotids supply the head. Within these major arteries are structures called baroreceptors that measure blood pressure and send nerve impulses up to the brain. If pressure is high, the walls stretch. If pressure falls, the walls are less stretched. Baroreceptors send information to the cardiovascular center in the medulla oblongata in the brain. When blood pressure drops, the slower rate of impulses from the baroreceptor conveys this disruption to homeostasis to the CV center. The CV center sends its own nerve impulses out to the heart and many of the blood vessels. The heart starts to beat faster, sending blood to the arteries at a faster rate. It also beats with greater strength, sending greater amounts of blood to the arteries with each beat. The nervous signals from the brain also signal secretion of hormones that constrict blood vessels, increasing their resistance. As the pressure of the blood in the arteries goes up, the change is detected by the baroreceptors that send the information about the restored blood pressure up to the brain. When the brain receives this response, it will cut back on its stimulation to the heart and blood vessels because homeostasis has now been achieved.
Because the stimulus caused the blood pressure, which is a control condition, to rise. Right? So that means the control condition was the blood pressure, and your blood pressure is not at homeostasis because it's rising. And the baroreceptor pressure-sensitive nerve cells, that receptors in blood vessels send impulses to the brain. So component 3, the receptors send the signal to the effectors, and while they communicate, as a result, the heart rate decreases, and the blood pressure decreases to normal restoration of homeostasis. So it's trying its best to counterattack the imbalance in the homeostasis of rise in blood pressure, and it's countering that by sending signal to the control center, which is the brain, and then it's countering that back to the nerve cells, which as an output impulses to decrease the heartbeat.
Labor preceding childbirth is an excellent example of a positive feedback loop that strengthens or intensifies the controlled condition. The stimulus that starts the cycle is contractions of the uterus that moves the baby's head into the cervix. When the baby reaches the cervix becomes distended or stretched. Receptor cells detect the stretch and change in the controlled condition of the cervix and send impulse signals to the brain. The impulses received from the nerves in the cervix trigger neurosecretory cells in the hypothalamus to secrete and release the hormone oxytocin. Oxytocin diffuses into the blood capillaries of the pituitary gland and is transported to the uterus. Oxytocin stimulates the smooth muscle tissue of the uterine wall to contract more forcefully. These more forceful contractions push the baby further into the birth canal, stretching the cervix more and triggering the stretch receptors to send more impulses to the hypothalamus. The self-amplifying nature of the positive feedback loop is repeated over and over with increasing intensity until the baby is born. After the birth of the baby, the stretching is halted and the positive feedback loop ceases.
At least that's how I understand it right now. Now let's move into the positive feedback loop. So, perfect example of positive feedback loop when a mother is giving birth. The labor begins with the cervix of the uterus is stretched, aka the stimulus, and the stretch sensitive nerve cells in cervix receptors that nerve cells impulses to the brain control center. The brain responds by releasing oxytocin, which stimulates the uterus effectors to contract more forcefully in response. Movement to the fetus further stretches the cervix. More oxytocin is released and even more forceful contraction occurs. The cycle is broken when the oxytocin is released. That's when the contraction is happening, when the baby is trying to come out of the womb. And right when homeostasis state is stored is when the baby fully comes out of the womb, the uterus, and it comes into the world, which is the birth of the baby in essence. So that's when the balance is restored and the contraction is not releasing anymore to that high intensity. Homeostasis state, balance or equilibrium. Because any disturbance in the homeostasis state on your overall body can lead to disorder, diseases, and even death.